Well, as the world grapples with the coronavirus pandemic, global attention has been drawn to the continued unhealthy exploitation of wildlife, which is increasing risk of zoonotic diseases, climate disruptions, extreme weather conditions, biodiversity, and livelihood losses in many countries. Well, the United Nations 2021 World Wildlife Day, commemorated on the 3rd of March, is therefore a call for global action to use nature in a sustainable manner for the good of humans and the planet. Onenge Fineface has more to tell us.
Are home to some 80% of all terrestrial wild species. They help regulate the climate and support the livelihoods of hundreds of millions of people.
Our forests are both beautiful and bountiful. They offer us rich biodiversity. They provide air that is cleaner and fresher. And they are a space for recreation, for balance, and for reprieve.
The 2021 United Nations World Wildlife Day with the theme Forests and Livelihoods, Sustaining People and Planet highlights the central role of forest ecosystems in sustaining indigenous and local communities in line with the Sustainable Development Goals.
So, on this year's World Wildlife Day, I urge governments, businesses and people everywhere to scale up efforts to conserve forests and forest species and to support and listen to the voices of forest communities.
In Nigeria, the federal government is responding to biodiversity loss by increasing the number of national parks from 7 to 17 and placing necessary regulations to protect wildlife in the country.
We have regulations on control of invasive species. We have regulations on access to genetic and beneficial. We have regulations on protection of endangered species.
World Wildlife Day 2021 also seeks to eradicate timber trafficking, which accounts for tropical deforestation, address organized crime groups and illegal trade in wild animal species, which is increasing risks of zoonotic diseases such as Ebola and COVID-19. In Abuja, Onengiye Fineface, NTA News.
And joining me now in the studio to expand the discourse on this year's World Wildlife Day is Mr. Mohammed Boyi. Thank you very much for joining us, Mr. Boyi. Mr. Boyi?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
All right,
as
now
well.
The theme for this year's World Wildlife Day focuses on forests and livelihoods, sustaining people and planet. Tell us the importance of this.
Okay. Once again, thank you very much for inviting me to participate in this interview. In fact, the World Wildlife Day, as it has been mentioned, that it was declared, to be done annually on the 3rd of March every year. And the theme for 2021 is forest and livelihood, sustaining, people and planet. I think the theme is well chosen, and it is actually very, very important because recently there is an outline or an information that was actually mentioned by scientists and other researchers that about between 200 and 350 million people depend or they live within or adjacent the forest. They depend, solely on that ecosystem for their livelihood. And what does that mean? That means that the forest ecosystem, in fact, provide them with some products which they can take to market and sell and then earn a living. We are very much aware of, beekeeping, which is, in fact, a very important, activity which brings in money, to the local community. Okay. The local communities or people make use of, forest ecosystem, for such activity. And even farming, soils actually in the forested areas are very productive. In fact, so farmers actually make use of that opportunity, to grow different crops. Okay, and then Mr. in terms of maintaining healthy ecological, balance, we know that animals, breathe in oxygen and gives out breathe out carbon dioxide. And this carbon dioxide, instead of going to the atmosphere and then pollute it, is actually being taken, by the forest, by the vegetation, by the trees.
Mr. Boyi, let me hold your thoughts there.
Yes.
You're aware that Nigeria is still inundated with unsustainable environmental practices. We have the illegal timber and wildlife trade. Now, how can the country get out of this situation and conserve natural ecosystem for posterity's sake?
Yeah, I think we can get out of this problem if we actually, embark on massive, publicity, telling people, the significance of wildlife and the need, to conserve wildlife resources. Now, we observe this day, the World Wildlife Day, once in a year. Perhaps we can also create a scenario in Nigeria whereby we can select or pick a day or a date which we can do our own, World Wildlife, Wildlife Day nationally, so as to raise awareness and tell people that, look, we need to conserve these resources. They are very, very important. We also need to engage, people in the media outfits, television, newspaper, radio, and what have you, so that they can also tell us in disseminating, these values of wildlife, in the country is very, very important.
Okay.
And again, we need to come up with policies and legislations that will, promote the conservation of wildlife resources. Is very, very important. At the moment, we have, the laws, but if you look at them critically, in fact, they are obsolete.
Okay, Mr. Boyi, of course, implementation is key. And when you talked about media, NTA is doing its part right now by creating more awareness. But very, very briefly, I need you to share with us the role of government, groups, individuals, if we must preserve biodiversity to sustain human life and ensure the health of our planet.
Okay, yes. For instance, governments, their mandate is very clear in terms of, conserving wildlife. They need to, come up with policies and laws that will actually enhance the conservation of these resources, as I've mentioned. They also need to pay emphasis in engaging the communities, because there are quite a lot of, number of species that are existing outside, protected areas. So they need to engage communities so as to, in fact, ensure that these water resources are really protected. And as per individuals, we have to do, each one of us must, in fact, engage in harvesting these resources sustainably. Because at the moment, what is happening, people look at it as a God-given, resources. So they just harvest the resources anyhow, unsustainably. But for as an individual, you have to look at it carefully. Some years back, these wildlife, in fact, they are very much around. Almost even if you go outside a village, you will encounter maybe with a hare, a rabbit, or an antelope. But these days, the situation have changed. So what does that mean? That means that people have been harvesting these resources on an unsustainable manner. So we need to change that attitude.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mohammed Boyi. Of course, we have to play our own role by, preserving their habitation. Thank you very much for your time.